Well, hello. We're live. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today on our leadership journey, walk in retail, lunch and learn. I hope you have your lunch and you have drinks. We have a lot to share with you today, and I'm super excited. And I'll tell you why a little later, why I'm so excited. But I am here with Saundra James. And as many of you read her bio, you know how fabulous she is and what she brings to the world of retail. And I'm going to share what she brings to my life a little later. I want to get into some other things first, but I can just tell you this, that without having a friend and a colleague as just compassionate, empathetic, and dynamic in her career in my corner, I would not be sitting here having this conversation with you all, because I really wouldn't have the story to share. And so I want to thank her, and we'll talk about that more later. So the first thing I want to talk about is just how impressed we get with titles. And as social media, you know, everyone's talking about personal branding and, you know, making sure that you put it out there with your titles. And even as the younger generations of professionals have come in, Sandra, they have, they get title before they get paid, right? They get title before they get experience. They get title and they chase title. And you and I have talked about this for, I don't know how long. I mean, we've known each other for like 30 years. So we've been talking about it for a long time. And I love your take on it. It's in addition to just learning so much, it helps you be introspective so that you can understand what makes you special. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'd love for you to take it from there.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Kimberly, for inviting me. And you are an amazing person too. And we'll talk more about our journey together a little bit later as well. But the title thing is so, you know, it's something that is, you know, near and dear to my heart. Because for the most part, I feel like titles are commodity items. Okay. And what do I mean by that? There are hundreds of thousands of people out there with the same title. All right. So what makes you different? I prefer to ask, do you want to be known for your title, or do you want to be known for your testimony?
Yes.
And when I say testimony, I mean your outward signs, your reputation, your achievements. Now, Kimberly started off talking about personal branding. Now, your personal brand says more about you than your title. It's not what your titled position calls for you to do. It's how you do it, why you do it, and how you do it with others. You know, your personal branding is it's your personal brand that brings the added value to a company. Every company, every day, looks at every employee and says, what is the added value you are bringing today? And magic happens in corporations when a person can take their own private brand, their own mission statement, their own vision, their own core values, and merchandise or commingle that with the organization's, you know, mission statement and branding. And that's when you create magic. And that becomes, you know, that becomes more important than your title. And, you know, and people don't realize that's also how you get the title. So that's, you know, that's pretty much my feeling on the whole title thing. You know, everybody wants a business card, or everybody wants to put that last line on their signatures with what, you know, what they do. And it's not about what you do. It's how you do it and the legacy that you leave after you're done doing it.
That's a gem. And I hope people were taking notes, because you show up before your title, right? Your title might get you you know, people might see your name and say, oh, that title I want to know more about, but you show up, right? And so how you show up is just so important. I had a conversation this morning with someone. I have decided to run for city council. And I was talking to someone who's a very powerful person in the community who knew of me, but didn't know me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think that's what's important to understand. People will know of you because of your title, right? He could tell me all my titles.
Right.
He just didn't know me. And so once we had that conversation, he was like, wow, this is fantastic because now I can put it together. And you show up as you, it needs to tie back to
Right.
all those things that you say you are. So I think what you just said was amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and we have some people who said testimony over title. That's right. That's
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's
and look,
what people are going to remember. People are going to remember. They're not necessarily going to remember your title. They're going to remember you and what you've done and what you've accomplished and how you treated those around you. They're not going to necessarily remember Saundra James, the senior vice president. They're going to remember Saundra James and what I did while I was senior vice president.
Well, so you opened the door to a really good thing. We want to talk about our journeys, right? Okay. And so the journey is twisty, turny, but I would like you to talk a little bit about, because everyone's here because you are Saundra James, the SVP and the professor, right? So right. Sandra, share a little bit about how you became Sandra. Because when we met, Sandra, I was an associate buyer at Express. And Sandra was wholesale, like the VP wholesale.
National sales manager.
National sales manager for Manhattan Beach.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so just a little snippet of the story. Someone had found samples that had been sent to us at Express. And I was the associate buyer of activewear. And somehow those samples they were one-ofs, had gotten to marketing and had gotten to Sports Illustrated. And so these people shot these bathing suits and said, oh, they're available at Express. Well, they weren't available at Express because I had never even seen them, but then they had to be available at Express and we didn't even sell swimwear. And so here I was as an associate, I had no idea how to start something new. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Oh God, I got to figure this out. And Sandra had a relationship with my buyer, but my buyer was not really interested in swimwear. So she was like, yeah, Kimberly, figure it out. I have to tell you, when I walked in the room and I saw Sandra, I was like, oh Jesus, she gave me a big one today, because I had not seen anyone who looked like me, had anything in common with me to that point. And so to have someone sitting across the table who, as soon as we talked, I knew, okay, I can kind of breathe, because this is somebody who knows their stuff and is not going to let me fail.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what's important about relationships and about this journey. Right. I think that's really what's important about this journey. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your journey from, well, you were a buyer first, then national sales manager, then SVP at Ralph Lauren, and now you're a professor, and like, just blow our mind.
I've done a little bit of everything, but I just want to lean into your story a little bit, Kimberly. And I want people to know that was such an M&M commercial moment. Our eyes met, and you could see it on our faces. We were like, they do exist. There are people out there that look like me, that are, that have the same goals, and we have a lot in common. And the minute we started talking, we knew immediately that this was a relationship that we wanted to cultivate. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit later, hopefully, about cultivating relationships. But I started my career in California. I'm originally from California. And, there's something that Kimberly talks a lot about, and she talks about doing things with intent. Mm-hmm. I was very intentional about my retail career. I knew when I was a freshman in college that I wanted to be in retail. I fell in love with it and I wanted to be a buyer. I came home from college. At the time I was at a small teacher's college. I came home and told my parents, changing my major. I'm going to be a business major. I want to be a buyer. I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I'm done with that. And my parents went, what? And I said, yeah, I want to be a buyer, da, 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 da. And they were like, okay. And they supported me. I came home, I changed colleges. I moved from a teacher's college to a university where they offered business degrees. And after college, I started at a department store there that was called Bullock's at the time. It was bought by Macy's. Everything now is Macy's. And it was an amazing journey. And I have to say, given the form that we have today, I want to say that journey was filled with twists and turns. Being a young Black woman, and that was back in the 80s, being a young Black woman in the 80s and being the only person there that looks like me, with the exception of another guy, I had to make some choices. I made choices in life. There was this pool of assistant buyers. They put us, they always put you together. They put this pool of assistant buyers together. We would sit together at lunch. We would talk together all the time. We were at this pool, and someone, thank goodness, pulled me aside and said, if you want to succeed and achieve, you're going to have to break away from your comfort zone, and you're going to have to sit and talk to other people. You can't just do the same things. And it was eye-opening to me. And, growing up in Southern California, we went to the museum on a field trip, because the museum was for field trips. Then I started listening, and I listened to other people. People went to see exhibits. And, one nugget that someone once said to me is that when you have a seat at the table, make sure you have something to say. And because it doesn't make sense if you're sitting at the table and you can't converse. And, I can't have a conversation about worldly things if I'm not out in the world doing something different. Right. I started doing that, and I started getting recognized. I started, changing my lunch circle, much to the chagrin of of the ladies they put together. And I started doing different things, and I became recognized, and eventually got promoted to buyer, and eventually became a buying supervisor. Eventually went to May Company and was still a buyer. I've traveled all around the world developing product. I moved to the wholesale side of the business about 27 years ago. Wow. And I've been on the wholesale side 27 years, and it's been amazing. I started as a national sales manager, and I worked my way up to senior vice president, managing a staff of designers, production, marketing, you name it, sales. I ran the whole business unit until it was sold about 2 years ago to an investor. I will say it wasn't a straight path. I've gotten jobs and I've lost jobs, but you know what? You pick yourself up and you keep going. And when you lose a job, you don't play the victim. All right. I didn't play the victim. And sometimes life isn't fair. And, one time in particular, during a time when we had to, cut staff and lay people off, and there were lots of people, and I had seen, the traditional white male was always put in situations to succeed, and always put in situations in the bigger departments. And, when it came time for budget cuts, I didn't have the worst business and I didn't have the smallest business. Right. But there were other people who did, but they knew people and da-da-da-da. So when it was time to lay someone off, Sandra got laid off. Now, I could have taken that and felt defeated and said, you know what, I'm a victim, but I didn't. The teachable moment there was, life is never going to be fair. The job is never going to be fair. I learned as a Black woman, I can't be on par. We have to work harder. We have to be better. We have to be, if the level set is here, we have to be here just to be judged here. And it's a sad, Kimberly,
it's not right. It's just not right, but it's fact, right? You know that Whitney Houston song, right? What is it? it's not right, but it's okay, right? Like,
Right.
right, like it's not right, but it is what it is, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, as you're talking, like so many things are like in my head. Like I remember, you know, for anybody who's here, what we're not saying, look, you're going to get fired and it's going to be okay, right? That's not what we're saying. And the first time is going to knock the wind out of you. It's going to feel like somebody punched you in the gut the
Right.
first time. But like anything, the first time is the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
And then you figure it out. And I remember the first time I had gotten laid off. I guess I had been in the business for a long time, but it was the same thing. It was, I was at Iconics and the world turned upside down. It was 2009, 2000. Yeah, the end of 2008. It was February 2009. And they were beholden to Wall Street.
Absolutely.
And I didn't have bad business. I had actually built some relationships, right? That was when I was brand president for London Fog and Joe Boxer and really built them into great businesses. But I also didn't have the personal relationship with the CEO and with the other people. Like I wasn't sitting in his office with my feet up. Like I just I didn't feel comfortable in that space. And I had to work harder, to your point. And I remember when it happened, like I had to lay people off several times. And then I was like, I walked in and there was a meeting happening and I was not in that meeting. And I was like, okay, so now it's time for me. And the same day I got laid off, they said, oh, before you go, can you lay these other people off? And after I did that, I made a few phone calls and I went to the movies. And I just sat in the movie theater, watched like 2 or 3 movies and got myself together. And I was like, all right, tomorrow's another day. You didn't die, right? It's not the worst thing that happened to you. And you just learned how to do something, right? I'm not sure exactly what it is I learned today, but I know there's a lesson in here somewhere, right? And that takes you on to another path, right? You learn that. The other thing that I think is extremely important that you said is exposure, right? Exposure and access. You don't know what the world looks like until you see it.
Exactly.
Right. And when you see how broad and how amazing the world is, it just gives you more ideas to be even better at who you are as a person and what you bring to the table as a professional. You know, the whole windy road. Anybody who thinks, I mean, I have so much admiration for you because I'll tell you the other thing where I admire is that you knew at such a young age what you wanted to do. I had no damn idea. Like I thought, so my degree is in radio, television, and film. And so I had always been in that space and performed and danced professionally. So I was like, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. And so I had a jazz show in Philly. Like I remember when my dad came home and he said to me, are you Kim Jones? Right? Like, cause I went to school at Temple and I was like, yeah. He goes, why didn't I know that? Why was I having coffee and they were like, oh, we have to put on this Kim Jones show. And he's like, he used to go to this diner in town all the time. And so he said, they put it on and they were like, Robert, you love jazz. You don't know about this show? Every Friday at 9:00, this girl really knows what she's doing. And he said he heard, and he's like, what? I think that's my daughter, right? And so I thought that's what my future was. Mm-hmm. And, not to make a long story longer, that wasn't my future. And Macy's was on campus all the time, the same recruiter. It was a brother. And he would just stop me all the time. And he was like, you sure you don't want to get into retail? And the only thing I knew about retail was what I had done part-time, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, you sound real crazy. I'm getting an education and I've applied to grad school. What do I look like being a store manager? Right? Right. Crazy. He's like, you don't even know what's available to you. Mm-hmm. And he just kept talking to me about different things. Meet this person, try this stuff. And that was what got me into it because I took the test, I interviewed, got into the executive training program. And once I got into that program, I thought, this is like a whole new world. I wanted to tell stories a certain way. but I could tell stories in a different way.
Right. Right.
I could meet people where they are, because that's what I love about that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I open my mind, and here we are, you know, almost 30 years later, and it's still near and dear to my heart. I'm just on the other side of it.
Right.
And I want to make sure that everyone who's listening, or everyone who can have access to us, has the same opportunities to be able to tell that windy road story
Mm-hmm.
and achieve what they could potentially achieve, you know. And there's tools, there's support, there's all those things, you know. And so we've told you about the windy road and what it takes for a woman, you know. And so often, or not even often, so few times, we get the opportunity to work with women who look like us,
Mm-hmm.
or aligned with us. And so when I came through, it was the late 80s, it was 88. And in the Macy's training program, you know, you start as a sales manager, then you get promoted to assistant buyer, then you're a group manager in stores. And I had gotten promoted to group manager in stores. And I was so excited because there was a woman who looked like me, and she was 10 years my senior, but she was a professional. Like, she didn't go through the executive program. She was a professional. I was so excited. Well, she wasn't. She was not. And the best way to describe her was, I can't even say the word because I don't like that word.
Right.
She did not like me. She just was like, well, so we have the same title and you're 10 years younger than me? What's that about? And I was like, well, I can't help that, but we could, I'd love to ask you and be, no, she was not having it and would just go out of her way to just, you know, and I think coming up at that point, late 80s, 90s, because we know now how hard it was for those few to get where they were, I can forgive and give grace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't understand it because it wasn't much easier for us.
Absolutely.
But it's a mindset,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my mindset was always, you know, I know Kamala made it famous because she's now vice president, but that was what my mom always told me too. You're going to be first. She didn't say when. She just always said, you're going to be first, or you're going to be the only.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure you don't leave it the way you found it.
Absolutely. I love that, you know, and Kimberly, when I hear that you are going to be first, you know, and that's so true. And that's so true in many other areas. But, you know, I want to add to that, you are going to be first. I want to add a comma, but make sure you leave the door open or help the second. You know what? If your sole goal is to be the first and leave it there, then what are you really doing? If you know, if you're the first, bravo, give yourself a hand. That's great. But you know what? Help out the second and the third and the fourth, you know, give back, make sure that and I'm not talking about giving back necessarily in an organized, you know, point of view that, you know, that rarely happens these days, but you know what, give back. And I'm going to use my relationship with Kimberly as an example. You know, when Kimberly and I met all of those years ago, we knew we wanted to network and become friends, and through that relationship, you know, Kimberly, as much as Kimberly says that, you know, I've influenced her, she's influenced me. I don't do anything without talking to Kimberly first. I don't take a new job.
We do that for each other.
What do you think about this? What do you think about that? We have, and just think about it, you know, Kimberly and I have, you know, and, you know, thankfully we found each other. This is something that the old boy network has had for years. Okay. And this is how they've built their careers for themselves and their sons. And, you know, we have to take those lessons and, you know, get that connectivity amongst ourselves and be open to help someone else. You know, I'm not threatened by the next generation. Okay.
That's right. I embrace it.
I embrace it because you know what? I love this industry. Okay. And that's one of the reasons that I started teaching, and I started teaching classes at night a few, maybe 8 years ago. And now I'm teaching even more classes. And now I teach a graduate class at Parsons. But the reason I started teaching is because I love this industry, and I wanted to have a voice in the future leadership in our industry. And it's important because you know what, you need to, I have a story to tell. And every time I'm in the classroom, I love to tell stories. And, teaching is a wonderful profession. There are a lot of, wonderful professors out there. But what I try to bring to my classroom is not just theory, but real world application. I try to begin each class, if not each class, every other class, with something that happened at work today, something where a strategic decision had to be made, or something that happened to change, to change the world. And we talk about those things. And it's important because, everything is so much faster now because of, because of the internet and everything is fast. So a lot of times people aren't taking the time to really sit back, think about, analyze and synthesize information and make the best decision. Everybody wants to make a decision quickly these days, but sometimes you really need to take that information, digest it before you move forward. And I think that's something that that can be missed a lot.
I think so too. And I think that we're in an industry where people have been rewarded for just quick decisions. And often those quick decisions aren't the right decisions. But then when you bring us into the room and we're making those quick decisions, if we don't make the right decision, we're not necessarily judged the same as other people who make those decisions. So there have to be ways to understand how to synthesize, right? And as you're synthesizing, you're navigating, and as you're navigating, you're having to look over your shoulder because it's not always a welcoming place. And not to say gloom and doom, but I think understanding how to navigate politics, especially the politics of retail and fashion, is its own special skill. And nobody teaches you that. If you're in a classroom and you're being taught by someone who's never practiced, then you're not going to learn. You're not going to learn how to do that. And I think that is something that gets in our way quite often, because the boys are playing golf or, pool or whatever they're doing, right? And then there are people who have been together since the beginning of their careers and bring people with them. And we don't get that opportunity as frequently. Right. And that's what's important to me about WOC in retail. Like, this is an opportunity for us to kind of pull the shades back and say, here, this is what really happens. And here's some situations that we've had to deal with that might be helpful to you as we continue to, pay it forward and, move forward in this industry, and make sure that the people that come behind us have as much opportunity or more than we did. The flip side of that, though, and I do want to talk about this because I've had this situation too, and you tell me if you've had the situation. I have always made sure that when I was recruiting for open roles, I want to have as many people as possible, and you better bring me someone who is a woman of color. Like, I don't even like we have. But I've had this situation a couple of times, and it's been so disappointing. So one time, I worked with outside organization that specializes in young people of color. And it was a entry-level position. And I really wanted to make sure that I embraced this organization. And the person showed up. They weren't prepared. They had done no research, not really pulled together, but knew that they were interviewing. Like, the person had told them, you're interviewing with a woman of color who is a senior vice president. And I think they thought, oh, I'm talking to my auntie.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not your auntie. Right? Like,
yes.
Yeah. like I'm running a business and I want to give you an opportunity, but you have to prepare for me as much as you would prepare for anybody else. And I just wanted to put that out there. Like, just because we saw each other, you and I saw each other, didn't mean that we could relax in our responsibility to the role and to being professional. And I think that that is really important. It doesn't give, it should give you inspiration to even bring more of yourself to the game.
That's what I was just going to say, Kimberly. I think I too have had that experience where someone comes in, you know, a woman of color, they see you and you can see in their body language, they immediately, you know, relax, or they immediately change and they immediately go back. And I don't want to say, you know, into a non-professional mode, but they really, you know, you can see they change. And, you know, and from my perspective, it's that, you know, I would think you'd want to come in even stronger, and you can say, you know what, I want to show this person, you know, how great I am. I'm going to knock it out of the park. And you can come, and you should think about this too. I may have a better opportunity to get the job with this person, so I better bring my A+ game. And there are times when, you know, it doesn't happen. And then conversely, Kimberly, there are times when, you know, the person walks in and you really want to give them the job, and they come in and they're not prepared. And I've often found myself saying, what do I do with that information? What, you know, because, you know, there are laws, so you have to be really careful, but
Right.
What do I do? How can I turn this into a teachable moment? Because, you know, you want to make, and, you know, and that's part of, you know, what I want my legacy to be. If I can see something and help you correct something that is going to, you know, further you in your career, I want to do that. But you have to be very, very careful.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason why, you know, teaching was, you know, my avenue for that, because it gives me a platform to talk about, you know, some of these things, and bringing your A game, and what you can and what you should and should not do.
Yeah, you know, I've gotten in trouble. I'm putting it out there. I've gotten in trouble because I've been like, okay, let's talk.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, am I the first interview you've ever had? And then you're like,
right.
No. So let's talk about how the other ones went. Well, I did da. And did you do that today? Well, no. Okay, yeah, no. So here's what we're going to do. And I've done this. So I've said, here's what we're going to do. I want you to start again. I'm going to reschedule this, and I'm going to pretend I've never met you.
Great. Okay.
And you're going to come back, and here's how you're going to prepare. And I've hired them in some cases.
Good.
I had one situation so funny story time. And then everyone, like Micah is doing, like, the comments are fabulous. Yeah, Micah, I'm not anybody's auntie. So like, that was fun. But when we finish this part, it's time for your questions. So be ready. Throw those questions in the chat and we'll answer them. But here's funny story time. So I am at a large retailer and I've hired some people, and one of them was this beautiful, beautiful Black woman. And she had some e-commerce experience, but not a lot. Right. And so I hired her in as an assistant because I thought she'd be fantastic. I mean, her resume, her delivery, everything about her was like, oh, we have a superstar coming here. And so her buyer was like, I don't know about her. So I automatically thought, because every time she came in my office, she was together. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, so what's the problem? So she was, you know, telling me what the problem was. And for some reason, she just goes missing for like hours. I'm like, missing? Does she leave the building? No, we don't know where she is. But like, I'll tell her, you know, you need to go get these samples or whatever for the shoot, and she'll just go missing. So I was like, well, that's just weird. I'm on vacation, and we go to Martha's Vineyard every year, and so the Boston Globe newspaper. So it's Sunday. I get to the style section, and here's the assistant on the cover of the style section taking a selfie in in the sample room. So I said, I was like, well, now we know where she's been missing. She's in the sample room setting up her photo shoots. Right? And the story was how she was the buyer of this big area and what her story was and how she had turned this business around. She had been there for 3 months. And I just thought, I was like, this is just hilarious. Like, it's the funniest thing. And when I got back to the office, you know, I had my article, I had the paper. And so I called her in and I was like, so tell me about this story that you created. Like, is this your goal? Did they misquote you? You know, did you? And so she was like, and then she left. And I wasn't upset. I said it to her exactly the way I'm saying it right now. I thought it was kind of funny because I was like, clearly they misquoted her. This is what her goal is. And good for her. Good for her for getting herself out there. I'm not mad at her. She's fabulous. But then she left. Like because I said, I don't know, but she just walked out the building.
Never to be seen again.
Never to be seen again. So, I mean, I was like, okay. That didn't work.
Wow. It's amazing the stories that happen in our business.
Yeah. So if you guys have questions, but now, you know, we're going to tell you about our relationship, right? And the other thing I do want to get to before we get off, because it's 1:35, so we have a good 15 minutes. So send your questions. But the one thing I do want to talk about, Sandra, and we've talked about this, is mentorship and sponsorship.
Yes.
And anybody who knows me knows that I have to talk about this because it's so important. Every time with my clients, if they're young women of color, they are like, we need a mentorship program. We need a mentorship program. And I just want to be very clear on know what you are asking for, right? So a mentorship program, there's no structure around it. And it's just someone who is trusted, has life experiences, and can support you in any possible way, right? And mentorship can turn to friendship, or friendship can be internship. I mean, mentorship, it can go both ways. When you're in a professional environment, you do not want a mentor.
Right.
Mentor is outside. When you're in a professional environment, you want a sponsor. You want to be someone's protege, because a protege is someone who is being guided with specific focus. Like we talked earlier about intention. Intention. A sponsor is intentionally focused on your career, and they are making sure that you are in the right room, you know the right people, you have the information you need to make that next step to continue to grow. So write that down and make sure that you understand the difference when you're asking for support. You don't want a mentor in the workplace. You want a sponsor. So I just wanted to get that out there. Now,
I want to add something to that, Kimberly, too. A sponsor, you know, to your point, a sponsor's end goal is to get you to where you need to be or want to be. When you have a sponsor, if you want to be the next senior vice president, and your sponsor's end goal is to get you to become that senior vice president and to put you in the places and put you where you need to be. That person is and I don't think we use this word enough, is an advocate for you. An advocate for you in the workplace, for your talent, for your abilities, for your value. You want someone who is to advocate for you when these things come up, because, you know, Kimberly and I have both sat in the room when jobs have come up, and, you know, and as you move up the corporate ladder and jobs become more important, people actually sit in conference rooms and talk about each candidates. And you have to understand that, you know, you want someone in that conference room that's there advocating for you. You don't need someone, a mentor to help you make decisions. No. You need someone to guide you and help you and advocate for you when they're in the room with a seat at the table.
That's right. And when you're not there.
Absolutely. Right. When you're not there, they've got your back.
That's exactly right. So Micah has a question for you, Sandra.
Okay.
How has teaching impacted your future outlook of the industry?
Very good question, Micah. I would say, you know what, it's impacted my future outlook in that I think I am very hopeful. I read a lot of negative stories, okay? And the media loves to say retail is dead and loves to say, that the customer, that the customer no longer is shopping. And because I'm teaching, I have to dig deeper than headlines and Instagram. So I dig deeper and I look for statistics and I look for stories. And, quite frankly, teaching has taught me that retail has never been better, that the store business is still the main outlet for shopping. Yes, is the digital platform and e-commerce growing? It absolutely is, but it was actually growing from a very small base. But you know what? I think the last article I read a few weeks ago, 70% of retail still happens in a brick and mortar store. Wow. So, and because I am in retail during the day, and I've been watching this very interesting phenomenon, and, you like to read about the demise of retail. There is something going on that happened, in the last 3 weeks. Retail has turned on. You wouldn't believe how strong it is right now. So, to answer your question, to make a long story short, teaching has given me a reason to be positive on the retail future and tune out all the negative images and the negative press that you hear about it.
That's excellent. Excellent. So here's another comment from Yael. Sponsors have power and influence and usually find you. They need you to be a protege as part of their high performing. Absolutely, absolutely true. Absolutely, we need to say that again for the people in the back that can't hear it. They usually find you. But here's the point. In order for them to find you, and they're very selective. And when we look at statistics, generally, I think Harvard Business Review just did a review on this whole concept of Black women and sponsorship. And generally, it's very difficult because they're looking for you and they're judging, right? And so that's why white men get sponsorship over women and white women get sponsorship over Black women, because it's not our fault, but when we get that opportunity, we need to make sure we're very clear on what our goals are, right? So I just wanted to say that because I think this was a really good point. The other thing that she says is for younger women who are just entering, right? Or, as long as you're there, make sure that you're doing excellent work first.
Absolutely.
That's how that's how you grab people's attention. Do excellent work first. It might be a harder run, but do excellent work first. So here's another question from Micah. What changes do you believe the industry must make to become more sustainable and circular? We have quite a few good questions here.
Okay.
So we're going to be answering questions for a minute.
Okay. I think that the industry has to become, the industry as a whole has to become more agile. Okay. And more nimble. I think, the fashion industry got locked into this Far East mentality of making lots of garments, making them in faraway places with large lead times, but that, consumers are no longer willing to wait. Now the consumer has so many different outlets to make a purchase. You need to have what she wants when she wants it, or you're going to lose the sale. So I think as an industry, the fashion industry needs to really understand how to take a lesson actually from fast fashion, but make that a little bit more global in its reach.
Yeah, I think to that point, we had talked about this the other day, back in the day when people were taking positions on fabric and ready to go quickly, and then they kind of got out of that and they were chasing this whole idea of fast fashion and killing the environment and all this. And I think that there's going to be, you have to slow down to speed up. Right. And that's why they're calling it slow fashion, because it's not really slow. It's just that you're being more mindful, right? And more planful. And you care more about the source of your fabrics and your materials, and how that affects the environment. So.
Well, to that question too, I'd like to add, there's been, the great thing about that, there's been wonderful strides in technology, and technology is really helping with, with the textile industry. The textile industry right now, I was doing some research on it not too long ago. The textile industry is as innovative as any industry out there. If you think about all of the new types of recycled fabrics, all of the even smart fabrics, and looking for sustainability issues, I think that as fashion becomes more technical in that respect, we can build a better and more sustainable product.
Next question. I'll take this one.
Okay.
So what advice would you give to women of color who come from the corporate fashion world but are transitioning to fashion entrepreneurship? So I know a little bit about that. For those of you who don't know, I used to have my own clothing line. It was called MSL. We sold in Saks. We sold in Nordstrom and in high-end boutiques all up and down the East Coast. And I was able to do that, and I'm going to tell you, here's my advice to you, Ashley. Make sure that you've been in the corporate fashion world long enough to create relationships. I cannot stress enough how important those relationships are. And here's why. When I left Express after 8 years, I left because I was an only child. My mother had passed away. She left. My dad had a brain tumor and brain surgery, and then I became responsible for my grandparents as well. And I had to make a choice because I could not continue to perform at the level that I needed to without jeopardizing my reputation. And I wasn't even 30. And so I knew I had a long path in front of me. But I didn't have a lot of money. And so, but I needed the flexibility. And plus I was always creating stuff anyway. So I said, this time is right. Now, I had such incredible relationships with my vendors and with people I had met in my travels. I didn't have to pay for my first line. Like I didn't. I designed it, and my vendors were like, hey, we'll make your samples for you. Let's, oh, and do you need someone to make these, quick samples? What do you need? Oh, you need to know this person. And so they introduced me to people. Now, it was Fashion Week. I didn't have $10,000 to put up Fashion Week, but I had friends who have relationships with people who I was able to do my first showing in New York City during Fashion Week at the Sugar Bar, which was, it was off the beaten path, but not really. We had, like, I forget all the people who came. Like, there were people who weren't invited, but they came to the Sugar Bar all the time, right? Like Luther Vandross and Roberta Flack and
Denzel.
Yes, Denzel. Hello.
Yes, so that means I was there.
That's right. Right. Okay. And so that was the relationship. They didn't charge me, and they were like, this is between sets if you can do your show here. And then there were some domestic vendors who I was friends with who said they brought potential salespeople who had showrooms on 7th Avenue. Like, they were very specific, but they took care of that for me. I didn't have to think about it. And so right out the box, I had a showroom on 7th Avenue. I had a sales rep who knew where it needed to be shown, had relationships, and it took off. Now, here was my mistake. As it took off and it was doing very well, I was feeling comfortable, and I took on a project with a very large retailer. I won't say who it is, but they had 300 stores, and created a diffusion brand for them specifically. They did a test, it blew out. I was like, oh, I'm about to be paid. And so I took a line of credit. And so I'm telling you this as a cautionary tale. I could manage what I was doing before. The income was supporting the outcome, and I was making a little bit of profit. I got really excited and took on this big project and took a line of credit. And I didn't have the foundation, the financial foundation to take that line of credit. And so I did that to do business with this large retailer. After the first delivery, and they're telling me it's blowing out and they're placing more orders, I put the orders in place. They went out of business. It took me almost 10 years to get my money back because I had to sue them for it. But in that time, I also had to go out of business and start working again if I didn't want to have bankruptcy on my plate. So my advice is have incredible relationships. Make sure that you're in it long enough to develop relationships that you know people can help you. Also, make sure there are a lot more avenues to funding now than used to be. Micah, who's on here, she and her sister have done an amazing job of pitching and getting the word out on this company. They own My Fashion. You guys go to My Fashion on Instagram. You'll see what they're building in the sustainable space and slow fashion and circular. But they created the support they need from a financial perspective by doing these pitch competitions and getting out there because in today's business, you have to have financial, you have to be solid on your financial situation because you never know what's going to happen. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah. So we are at 151. So Sandra, what do you want to leave everyone with?
Wow. What do I want to leave everyone? What I want to leave everyone with is I'm going to go back to a statement that I said earlier, because I know everyone here wants a seat at the table, and you're working very hard to earn that seat at the table. And I support you all. Make sure you have something to say when you're there.
Great. Now I want to answer this question. We got one more question in.
Okay.
So, and maybe, no, I want you to answer it.
Okay.
Because I'm just going to say a little bit to it. So it says, in regards to sponsorship, what advice would you give someone who feels like their excellent work gets overlooked and or not getting noticed by the right people that have the power to influence? So I'm just going to say this about that. I've been in that environment, like that specific environment. Mm-hmm. And I know, I feel it viscerally when I read this because I know that is true. Mm-hmm. And what needs to happen, there are a few things that you can do. One, oftentimes people sponsor people they have personal relationships with. So if you have the opportunity to, maybe sit down with your boss, have a conversation, take them to have coffee, get to know them on another level, it will help. It's just part of that extra that we have to do. It's like when we walk in the door, we have to prove ourselves. And I mean, every day it's exhausting, but it is what it is, right? It's like, it's Micah gave me the right words. I forget. It's not right, but it's okay. I'm going to make it anyway. Mm-hmm. Like that's kind of the tax that we have to work past. And so that could be helpful. The other thing that I say, and Sandra, you might not agree with this, but I say, oftentimes people don't see your value until they see someone else acknowledge it.
I agree with you.
And we stay in these places and then it makes us miserable. There are other people out there who will see your value.
Absolutely. And it's value that counts. Kimberly, I agree with you on both counts. Because, making that that connection with someone. And I have found, because I too have been in that situations, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But 9 times out of 10, if you go to that person who is typically your boss, you go to them, and sometimes it's it's the way your boss is feeling and it has nothing really to do with you. And if you make your boss feel better about sponsoring you, about saying, look, hey, you know what? I think you're great. I want to learn. I want you to take me along. Try that. And if that doesn't work, I agree with Kimberly. You know what? You will, it's all about your value. And if no one is respecting your value at position at company A, then company B or C will. All right. So, and don't be afraid to shop your value. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Don't be afraid to shop your value around.
That's right. Know your value.
Yeah, know your value.
When you say you're doing excellent work, make sure you are doing excellent work. Yep. And I'm sure you are. Just because I know where you are. I'm sure that you are doing excellent work. Make sure you have a plan, and you say, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And when that, and that don't work for you,
time to go.
It's time to go.
Time to go.
So, wow, this has been fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you, Kimberly, for inviting me. This has been great.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And, we're going to keep at this. I hope it was helpful to everyone who's here. And we'll see you in a month. I'll be sending more information. And then I'm going to post in WOC and Retail the link to the survey, because feedback gets us better. But there are so many amazing things that we are working on for this group. I can't even. I'm so excited. I can't wait. But Sandra, as always, just such an amazing time spent with you. Thank you for your time this afternoon. And do you want to tell everyone how to reach you if they have questions or just want to follow you?
If you want to reach me, I am on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Please look me up. I'm at Saundra James MS on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to stay in touch, and I'd love to see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. So reach out to us and enjoy your weekend. We'll see you in a month.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.